lights on. So this is where all the pressure is. And you can probably feel the nervousness already just running through your body. So if you can just fight through it, we'll just talk about crowdfunding. So why don't we do a simple and quick sound check here before we jump in. Why don't you tell my listeners what you had for breakfast this morning?
So for breakfast, pretty simple. Just had yogurt and some orange juice. Nothing too fancy.
Nothing too fancy there. That's a staple. Yeah. Well, yogurt and orange juice. Awesome. Cool. Well, I think we're sounding good. We'll jump right into it here. So why don't you tell my listeners what you're currently raising money for over on Kickstarter?
So our company is called Albicchiere, and we're based in Perugia, Italy. And really what we've done is we created the world's first smart wine dispenser. It has a lot more than it actually does than just pour wine, but realistically in a snapshot, we use smart bag technology that communicates with our dispenser, and it just gives you the perfect pour of wine.
That's interesting. So for our listeners who can't see it or haven't been on the page yet, can you describe it with words? Like, what does this look like? Is it a big thing on a desk somewhere? What does this thing look like?
So realistically, it looks like it's sort of like an enlarged and fancy coffee machine. It has a display in it, and it has a case that opens up that has the internal components that communicate with the technology, which is sort of like a little bit of a larger coffee machine is how I describe it with a fancy display.
That's interesting. And what's happening then? So is it something that walk me through how you use it? Is it I open a bottle of wine, I dump everything in there, or is it at like the end of the meal? I didn't finish the bottle, then I use it how would people use this?
So I guess from beginning to end, if I could just take a couple moments to describe everything right off the bat of how it works, and then maybe develop the conversation from there. Sure. So everything starts out at the cantinas or the wineries themselves. We have smart wine bags that they're a lot more durable, they're a lot more lightweight, and less fragile than the traditional glass bottles. So coming directly from the winery, we'll have these smart wine bags, and then they get shipped to whatever the point of destination is. We use NFC technology, which means it tracks it from point of origin to point of destination, and it lets you know the condition your wine arrived in. So maybe it got ruined in transit somewhere in the supply chain, if it got exposed to too much heat or cold, or if it was repeatedly shaken. You could just do a quick test with your phone, and you make sure that the wine arrived in perfect condition. And again, it uses blockchain technology, so it can't be manipulated. And once you actually confirm that it's good, it goes inside of our smart wine dispenser. It's a really quick, easy system. The wine itself is inside of the bags, so the bags are formatted to work with the dispenser. They just pop in, it's a couple seconds, and then the dispenser itself will read the NFC chip. So it will give you the display of the wine, the year, make, model, all of the information that comes from the wine, and the recommended conditions from the cantina. From that point, what our dispenser does is it will heat it up, or it will cool it down to the recommendations from the cantina. But let's say you have your own wine bottle itself, you have something at dinner, and you just don't finish the bottle for whatever reason, or if you have a really expensive bottle that you want to preserve, what happens is our dispenser comes with an adapter. It's a really simple system. We have some white label bags that also have NFC chips in them, and you literally could pour it from the bottle into our smart bags. And our dispenser itself also has a sensor on it, or you could use our app, and you could just literally say, program this to be, Rufino Red 2019, and it stores all of that information.
Wow, man, that's a lot going into just having a glass of wine at dinner. Man, that's a lot of stuff. That's awesome, though. So it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, then what you're describing. So is it I'm ordering full bags of wine then that are being shipped to me? Is that's the best way to sort of kind of use the system?
So yeah, we have 80 plus letters of interest from across Italy, but we had a lot of fanfare at CES. So people have been reaching out from across the world, which has been pretty cool. So it can come directly from the cantinas themselves, from the wineries themselves, but also if you just happen to have a bottle at your house, you could, pour it directly in. So it's multi-use. So you can use it from traditional bottles, or you can order it and have it directly as is in the bags to begin with.
That's cool. And is it something that you can store, like, do you have two different bags in the machine, or is it one bag in the machine per bottle of wine?
So as of right now, because we're still, a pretty young company, we're starting close to home, and we're starting with one bag per, but it's a seamless transition. So let's say you're having a glass of wine with a couple friends, or you're enjoying some wine with some friends, and, people want different wines. It's as easy as just literally opening the dispenser itself, pulling one bag out, and you could store it in a normal room condition, temperature condition, atmosphere, and then just putting another one in. It takes a couple moments to heat it and cool it to whatever you want it at. And then the next one is ready to go. So again, you're just talking in a matter of a few moments to switch them out.
That's cool. Where was sort of the starting point of this idea, or like, hey, this is a problem I think we can fix? Where did that sort of start to happen?
So that happened with my colleagues in Italy. So we're an Italian company, and two of my partners, the two founders, are Diego and Massimo, and they've worked together for about 12 or so years doing, technology problems and resolution problems. And one night at dinner, they realized that, the wine wasn't quite right when they chilled it, and when they chilled one of the whites, it was just too cold at that point, and it wasn't getting served, at the proper conditions. So that was sort of the brainchild of saying, hey, let's explore this opportunity or this option.
That's interesting. And in a process like this, it seems like there's a gazillion variables, not only just in the manufacturing, but in the wine side itself, of like each wine is the best at this temperature, flavor, whatever it might be, all the different variables there. How do you start to sort of corral this gigantic task, though, to get to where you guys are right now? Like, what are those steps in that process?
So I think you hit the nail on the head with that, because wine and the fan base itself is so particular. So people have different tastes, different recommendations. So we started out, we're coming up with the database from the cantinas themselves for their specific recommendations. We're building the database on there, and we're incorporating all of that information into our information system right off the bat. But again, it's adjustable. So let's say you have a particular wine that you like and you want it a little bit higher, a little bit lower. You can also record that yourself, and you could have it, adjusted for something for your specific preferences or tastes.
Wow. How did you get involved in this with the company in Italy and stuff? What's your story? How did you get there?
So I had a really weird transition in general. I spent 5 years in the military, and after that in the U.S. Army, I applied to college, didn't know anything about it, and the first thing they told me when I was accepted was to study a foreign language. So randomly chose Italian, and I had a business background and kind of was bouncing around with that and going abroad. And I have another company there with one of my partners, and through the circuit in Italy with the startup community, I ended up meeting them and getting invited to go out to CES when they were invited back in 2019. And right off the bat, it was still really early at that point. But I knew that this is something I wanted to be part of. And when I saw what they were doing and what they saw what I was able to do, we know that this was, kind of a good match for both of us.
Yeah, that's great.
Really weird transition though.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, and it, like, again, are you a wine connoisseur? Like, is that something that was in your background where you're like, oh, I've got the, there was a Netflix documentary. What's the special, like the people that have like the special taste buds that like taste the wine? Isn't there a name for that? Like,
oh yeah. Yeah, they have them, and they even have like wine ambassadors and all this high level, but I don't know if you see the hat right here, but so I'm not too far across I'm on the other side of the lake from you in Buffalo. Yeah. And where I grew up in South Buffalo, it's very, Buffalo's transitioning, but it's very cheap whiskey and cheap beer, and that's what I grew up with. Yeah. So when I was studying abroad, I was like, oh, this wine thing, it's really not for me. And then once I actually started giving it a chance and sampling and seeing, I was like, oh, this stuff's actually pretty cool, but it's nothing that I grew up around. Definitely not a connoisseur by any means, but have expanded my palate at least to be in that field.
That's nice. And when you guys were putting this together, what was the conversations around like a customer persona, especially with a product that has, a very high end expertise level down to, I went to CVS and bought the $6 thing or whatever, I just wanted some wine. Like how did you guys start to identify who you thought this customer would be, who would want this, in their kitchen or, or at their home? How did you guys start to kind of figure out who you think would support this?
So, I mean, that is such a huge question that has so many variables as well, because I think a lot of companies, especially the startup community, wants to say, well, hey, we're going to create a product that's good for everybody across the board. We want to try to reach as much of a mass as possible. And, that's ideal. But in all reality, we had to identify who our clients were going to be. For example, we're an Italian company, but Italians are very particular with their wine. And we weren't foreseeing having the feedback that we did with Italy. When we launched the crowdfunding campaign, the Kickstarter campaign, we had a lot of positive feedback from Italy, which was quite a surprise. We were traditionally expecting this to be a huge market in North America and Northern Europe, where they enjoy wine, but they're they're beyond the tradition of having bottles, or, you know, we're not trying to break that tradition. That's always going to be there, but we're trying to solve some problems. And I think it's so ingrained in the culture there. So we started looking at who are the wine drinkers, not just in North America, but who are the wine drinkers out there, and then who are the ones that this product would appeal to. People could afford it, but who just don't want to waste it. The biggest problem I think that we solved that I didn't mention earlier is with our system, once you open a bottle of wine, it's good for up to 6 months, which the closest thing on the market right now, the way it's on the market, there's a few things that use gas and pump systems that extend it for a couple days to maybe 2 months is at least as far as I've seen. So we solve a problem way beyond that, where we're not just heating and cooling it, but we're preserving the wine. So when we're looking at who our client base is, we're looking at a lot of, okay, does this have more B2B, business to business impact, or business to customer impact? So one of the logical approaches were, okay, well, restaurants and wine bars, which are popping up all over the place, because right now they sell less expensive wine by the glass, because they really can't afford to spend or use a more of an expensive bottle and have it go to waste. That's what our name means. Albicchiere, it means by the glass. So now people could have unlimited access to their inventory. So whether, you know, it's an affordable product. So if you're, you know, we have a huge demographic of, you know, young moms who just enjoy a glass of wine, but maybe don't want to get sloshed. So, you know, where they're not, you know, taking out the whole bottle, to bars and restaurants, to young, not even just young, but couples. You know, we have a lot of demographics, so it's still kind of honing in on that, but if that kind of makes sense. Sorry,
no, definitely. Well, you know, it's intriguing because, you know, I kind of spaced on the restaurant. So I used to work in restaurants forever, but like, you know, as the startup and as you're kind of going, you know, I can almost see like a restaurant needing, you know, 10 of these, or like, you know, just that wholesale B2B, as opposed to going to the one-offs, right? The right to the consumer. As a startup, did you guys have conversations around, hey, let's try to focus, let's go to Kickstarter because it's going to go to consumer, as opposed to standing back and going, man, let's just call restaurants, because it feels like a no-brainer to a restaurant. I just think about all the wine that you waste. You know, like I opened a bottle and we sold 2 glasses.
Exactly. You know? Exactly, and we've had that discussion. You know, I've tried to bring my knowledge from the American market and trying to, you know, do a lot of research on that end to present it, because different countries have different markets, but that's just a logical transition. And I think it went from, okay, well, where is going to be our primary focus, at least in the beginning? Is it going to be the business? Is it going to be the customers? Because there's restaurants, even the airlines. We've been in talk with some who really like the idea, because our product is a lot lighter, you know, where all of the, you know, material matters, the weight. So we've generated a lot of interest. And I think some people are waiting to see how our Kickstarter campaign goes before we get to that level. But what's really cool about that is we're getting the recognition. We're getting a lot of publicity, and especially at CES, we won an innovation award. We were one of about 80 companies there to get that, which was, you know, really humbling. Because, thank you so much, because it's brought a lot of positive press in our light, and a lot of people have, you know, I got laryngitis from just talking so much there, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Is there a, you know, with a product like this, is there a, like, do you have to navigate the purist factor of, like, you know, just this whole niche that you're in? You know, is there like that purist who's like, oh no, the wine has to do this has to happen, this has to happen, it has to be in a glass, or like is that something that you guys have to navigate? Almost like maybe it's like the troll world of this niche that could possibly potentially be there. Is that something that you guys have to kind of navigate?
Not as much as we thought, because again, that's a conversation that we've had, and we know that, you know, wine has been around since the beginning of time. So we're trying to bring something that's this age-old market into the 21st century. So we've had a couple people, a handful, say, okay, well, you know, you're going to have a really difficult time, or you got a lot of barriers to overcome, which some of them we understand. But again, with the Kickstarter, we were surprised to see, you know, the feedback that we've had, because we solve a lot of problems. You know, again, we understand that bottles will always be there. But one of the things we do is we're 40% greener, because when you're shipping these bags, it lets you know where in your supply chain the damage is. So you're protecting your inventory. It's also a lot lighter, so you're not putting as many emissions in, and it's just easier to ship at that point. The bags are more durable. So I think a lot of people are recognizing, like, these are some real problems that we're solving. We're able to protect the inventory. We're able to ensure that our product arrived satisfactory. So although there is kind of, like you said, that I don't want to necessarily call them trolls, but people who are very traditional,
Yeah.
that's always going to be there. And we understand that, but we want to make sure, hey, if you have this, high quality bottle that maybe you want to only use for special occasions, can extend the life of that for, a much longer time period.
Right,
So,
right. Yeah, I think it's because this is such a long tradition wine, right? I mean, come on, this is long. It goes back as long as we all can remember, right? That to sort of inject technology into this like sacred thing, I can see how it could potentially rub some people like, we don't need tech in this. We've survived for 2,000 years or whatever it is, like, do
mhm.
we need all this tech? But yeah, I see what you're saying of like, man, it's the shipping, the green, knowing if something's been damaged, extending the life. It feels like it's a win-win. Yeah. So very, very cool. Let's flip over a little bit to the actual Kickstarter. So, as you guys are sort of navigating, and we kind of talked a little bit about it, but maybe expand a little bit more on how and why you thought, hey, let's go to Kickstarter to prove some of these things and to try to get some feedback. Like, why did you guys make that decision?
Well, there were a lot of internal conversations, and there's a couple platforms out there, and just the conversations we had, we decided to go with Kickstarter. I don't think it was necessarily just to raise the funds, but to get a test. I mean, that's been cool, and the feedback's been pretty cool with that as well. But it's to get an understanding of saying, okay, well, we know that this product makes sense. We solve so many problems, the things that we just spoke about. We know that this makes sense. It's a no-brainer for us, but what does the public think? What do clients think? What do people think? And again, we could get, feedback at CES and, some of the conversations from the cantinas, but this is within the internal wine community itself, or people who are just interested in tech. So what was pretty cool and why we decided with the Kickstarter, one of the thoughts was, well, let's see what, the real world thinks about this. Let's see if we can, bring this to this platform, and let's see if we can have success. And, me personally, I was just a little nervous just to see what the feedback is. It's like, okay, we have 45 days to meet this goal.
Mm-hmm.
I hope we can. I think we set the bar at an appropriate amount. We had those discussions, and the feedback's been pretty good.
Yeah, that's great. And I forgot to mention too is, I mean, so right now we're talking with about 34 days ago. When this goes public, it'll probably be around day 30, day 29, somewhere around there. But you guys are right now at about 116,000, and your goal was roughly about 33,000 or so. So you guys have obviously crushed it at this point, and it should literally only be going this way. So that's great.
Thank you.
But behind the scenes, what was maybe like the biggest challenge that you guys, in terms of either putting the page together, the story, the branding, the rewards, pricing, shipping? What was sort of the biggest thing that you guys had to like sort of be like, yeah, we're going to do this, but now here's this challenge?
Well, there are several challenges, and we've worked with a couple of really wonderful professional companies that helped us with our Kickstarter campaign. And there were a lot of internal discussions because, everybody approaches you, especially when they think that you have a really good product, of saying, okay, we want to bring this to fruition. So we worked with a couple great companies. It was first deciding who we want to work with. One of the hugest obstacles to overcome is, the Kickstarter, the main base of it. Well, I don't want to say the main base, but we knew that there would be a primary base that were not native Italian speakers. So it's getting all the information, everything that's in Italian, and making sure we're transitioning it into English, and making sure we're having the verbiage and the right terminology. And we're able to describe this to not only wine connoisseurs, but people who might be just completely ignorant in the field, and break it down to its simplest forms without obviously being condescending or insulting to anybody. And the commercial alone, there was a lot of back and forth with again, making sure we have the right language, because there is a lot of translations that go through that. So that was a huge effort, maybe at least on my behalf, I could say, but I know my partners also had some huge obstacles to overcome as well. But for me personally, that was a big one.
Yeah. Was there any sort of hesitation of having it listed as an Italian company? Because I mean, just from what we've seen as an agency from afar, sometimes countries outside of, the States or Europe or whatever have a little bit of a harder time, just because the Kickstarter community is just not as, it's just not as popular in some of those countries and stuff. Was there anything along those lines?
I personally don't think so. I mean, we've had discussions and saying, okay, do we want to keep this a made in Italy product? We have that designation right now, which is really cool, because people associate Italy at least with more luxurious designs, with more quality products. And we really like having that designation. With that being said, there are a lot of benefits to bringing it abroad, specifically here to the United States. So that's, a conversation that we did have, and that, we're still continuing the discussion on that to say, okay, are we going to keep this primarily based in Italy? Are we going to, come back in and, headquarter here in North America? There's, a larger client base here, we think. There's money here for investors. There's a lot of motivations. And that's one of the cool things, is just having the ability to, come back to the U.S. and then go back to Italy, back and forth. If that's a problem I have, I'll gladly accept that challenge.
It's not a bad one. It's not a bad one. Well, Buffalo's a lot like Italy, from what I've read in the past, right? It's like the same landscape, about the same.
Cold temperatures, north tundra. No.
I mean, like, well, you and I probably have the exact same weather. I haven't seen. When was the last time you saw the sun? I don't know.
Yeah. In Las Vegas, and then
you had some Vegas time. I haven't been to Vegas in a while. Yeah.
No,
so.
And then from there, I was pretty lucky. They call Las Vegas the ninth island. So there were a lot of cheap flights, and I was stationed in Hawaii when I was there, so I also went back there for a couple of days. So it was nice to get away for a little bit.
Yeah, I'm just stuck in Detroit. So gray skies. I'm looking at them right now. Has there been anything that sort of stood out to this point with the crowdfunding campaign? Maybe on the dashboard, like we got a lot of Japan orders, or something like you just didn't kind of anticipate, or has there been anything that sort of stuck out as intriguing?
Well, there are a few things. One is, and you alluded to this earlier, is I think it took us about, I want to say an hour, just to be a little bit diplomatic, but I think we reached the goal within about 30 minutes, which was a huge surprise. Again, we weren't sure just honestly what to expect. We had ideas, we looked at projections, we were looking at other companies and kind of what they were able to do. So the fact that we knocked it out, and now we're at about 350% of our goal, and there's still, we're only about a week plus into it. So that was a huge thing. And the other one I also alluded to earlier was the feedback that we had in Italy. I mean, this is obviously an Italian product, and I think there's a lot of pride that goes with the Made in Italy designation. But again, with them just being, with Italians being so traditional, we were surprised to see, looking at the data, how many people in country were really interested in this product as well.
That's interesting. So, when you're in a campaign like this and you've got that momentum, what starts to happen with 34 days to go outside of being on this podcast? I mean, that's obviously the first thing you have to do, but past that, what other strategies are you guys like talking about, thinking about, to sort of maximize the win that you've already had?
So, I think with us, it was sort of like a rocket ship. It kind of took off pretty quickly. And then we've had sort of, a continual return at a specific point. So we're still seeing some growth, but obviously it's not as an accelerated pace. So now we're working with companies in the international realm to make sure that we're still getting traction and bringing this to other markets out there. We've talked with people from Argentina, Australia, a lot of people in California, and even here in New York, because wine is, obviously very popular in the Finger Lakes region for production. Israel. So we're trying to make sure that we maintain, that attention that we're getting, and let people know, hey, this is a product that are out there. Because again, with all of the fanfare we've received from CES, there has been a lot of positive publicity that we've been receiving, and we're so grateful for people like you and your colleagues in the media for keeping this out there. But we want to make sure it still kind of stays at the forefront. So I'm going to be hitting up some of the wine fairs. The first one of the year is going to be taking place here in Buffalo in just over a week. So I'm going to be presenting the product there, and as other ones as we continue on.
That's cool. What happens, after the campaign ends, all the money drops and all the dust sort of settles on this? What starts to happen behind the scenes for you guys as a company? Is manufacturing or finding factories? What starts to happen?
So, I think the first thing is making sure we're able to get this to our clientele in the time that we've projected. They've been extremely faithful to us, so we want to make sure our customers know, like, we're not just taking the money and going to kind of squander on trying to get more PR and stuff. Like, yeah, we want to try to get some advertising that's done, but we want to make sure that this is manufactured and developed. Again, there's been some internal conversations on that. We've had some companies that reached out and said, hey, we might be able to produce this at a lower cost, or do the same thing. We might be able to manufacture that at that level. But just to, make sure we know that where we know where we're going with this. So if we're staying in Italy, if we're bringing it here to the US, or if there's another opportunity, and, getting the product out to our customers.
Yeah. In a product like this, what is like the biggest nightmare? Is it on the software side? Is it on the hardware side? Is it on the all the data for all the wines? Like, what's the biggest thing that you would say keeps you guys up at night?
So I think that that's more what my colleagues deal with on that end. But I would say anything that's hardware related is obviously going to be expensive.
Mm-hmm.
You got to come up with the engineering design, the moldings. You got to make sure that the technology works. You got to make sure it communicates with the software. So I think it's all encompassing. I don't know about keeping up at night per se as troublesome, but it's just sit there and make sure we are developing this. We're delivering what we promised to our people and making sure all the components, because there's so many moving components,
Yeah.
are able to communicate with each other and deliver a high quality product.
Is this a product at some point that could, and this I don't know, can go into other beverages at all, or?
Yep. So we're exploring that, and one of the things that we were reached out tons actually at CS was for sake, because same thing with that. It's, I would say, even more particular with the temperature that it's served at. So that's one of the problems that we solve. So we are looking at getting in other industries and beverages right now. We're starting to do some research. Wine made the most sense because that was close to home. That's where it all started out at. It only works for still wine, so non-sparkling wines, non-champagnes where there's carbonation inside. We are exploring other channels with this, but to add on to that, another application is medicine, and we were reached out with by some doctors and some engineers who want to use this as a system to administer medicine, because the technology we use is sort of a pump style system, so it distributes a specific amount. So let's look at an IV, for example. If you have the traditional IV, it has to stay above your heart, otherwise you'll start getting the backflow, and it drips it at a certain rate. This could administer certain fluids at a specific amount of rate at a specific time. So there's even beyond the beverage industry, there's a lot of places to go. So we're exploring those options as well. It's just making sure we crawl, walk, run, and solve one problem at a time.
Yeah, that's both of those are big other industries to to just jump into. Man, holy cow. Yeah, that's great. So, so with the campaign all ending up, so what does like this next year look like? Maybe specifically for you, like, what does day to day look like? Where do you guys at this point next year? What has happened?
So at this point next year, hopefully we'll be at CES again, and we'll have the product where we could actually have the full out demonstration or something nearby, because there's specific regulations with distributing alcohol. But we would say at the close of summer, early fall, we have the crowdfunding, the people who purchased through the Kickstarter campaign. They have their Albicchieres, they have their Albi machines. They're able to give us some feedback, what's working, what's not. Continue to work with the cantinas at the global scale. So hopefully there will be a couple cool trips going to Australia or New Zealand, South Africa, Argentina, where there's huge wine developers, where we can bring this product to the table for their company. Again, it solves so many problems. So we've had, the people reaching out. We have especially a lot of smaller cantinas or wineries who exclusively go abroad because they can sell their product, let's say, for 10 euros in Italy, but they can sell it for 35 euros in North America. So, we could really streamline that shipping process for them, reduce costs. So really expand our base of wineries, I think, is another great place, and work out the kinks in the system, and hopefully start developing a two-tiered or a multi-tiered system as well.
Yeah. That's cool. How about 5 years out? Can you guys project that far out and say, like, this is where we think this industry is going? Just can you guys, like, what does projections look like for a product like this?
So the wine industry itself, and if my numbers are correct, if my memory serves me correct, is about a $432 billion industry globally annually. And we have such a hard time comprehending what that number means. And a way that I kind of put it together so people could understand is 432 billion seconds ago, we have no recorded human history of anything. So it's just such a massive industry. So I think there's a lot of growth overall. 5 years, I think, at least the way the market is now and trends are, especially here in North America, we're seeing wine bars pop up all over the place. We're seeing craft beer development. We're seeing people get into more, boutique style. We're seeing, dads across the industry start to do microbrews and people get into these industries. So we want to help small businesses or aspiring entrepreneurs we want to help them achieve their goals. We want to make sure we're able to cater to the industries that are across the board. We've envisioned having this in casinos. One of the things that I didn't mention is it's compatible with Alexa and with Google Home and stuff. So you could literally, if you have, a glass of wine under your Albi, you could sit there and say, Alexa, prepare me a glass of wine at 4:30. So you could have the wine ready for you while you're waiting. Just got to make sure the glass is underneath, at least at the moment, because if not, you're going to come home to a mess and maybe a drunk animal if you got a cat or dog hanging out. There are parental controls with it too, but which is pretty cool. But we envision it being in hotels across America, where you could just sit there and say, well, instead of open up the mini bar, you could literally walk in your hotel and say, hey, pour me a glass of this or have that. So we like to have it in the airlines. Like, so we're in early development talks with the airline industry, but again, it's a lot lighter, and it's more durable. So we like the airline industry as far as having this on the jets across the sky, so you're not opening up big heavy bottles or just throwing away a ton of mini bottles. So we're really trying to reduce waste. Our bags are 100% recyclable, which is pretty awesome.
That's awesome too.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So we're really trying to solve, we're working with solving a lot of problems that especially go into waste. We've had this guaranteed through our packaging partner that all of the materials we use have the ability to not end up in landfills. So that's
awesome.
Another thing.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, on our end, we're watching it. We're my wife and I are some wine connoisseurs over here, so we are monitoring this campaign and probably going to become supporters here because it seems like just a phenomenal product. How can people learn more outside of the Kickstarter? How can they dive into your guys' universe?
So Kickstarter right off the bat has all the information on it, and it really gives a really good snapshot of any questions that you have. We have the FAQ up there. We also have the traditional social media sites. We have our website albicchiere.com, and we also we're on Facebook with the same name. And so we have the traditional sources that are out there. Some of the other things that you could maybe look up if you're into reviews, just Google Albicchiere CES 2020, and then you could look at some of the tech reviews that we've had, or some of the reviews from Decanter and some of the other publications that have been very kind to us as well.
That's awesome. Well, Doug, I appreciate you taking time out of your day. I know in the middle of a Kickstarter, super busy, a lot of stuff going on, but I think I'm hoping my audience really dug this, and I know I enjoyed our conversation. So again, I'll put all the show notes and the URLs and all your links in it so people can go click on it. But Doug, I appreciate it.